Hello there again, and welcome to Market Insight on Souk News Television, Lagos, Nigeria. I am David Chiedu. On the program this morning, we're discussing urban farming as a sustainable pathway out of Nigeria's unfolding food crisis. Now, Nigeria, as you know, is facing an unfolding food crisis with rising prices, scarcity, and malnutrition threatening the well-being of millions of Nigerians, as evidenced by the ongoing protests in the country. Now, a recent report from the Ministry of Agriculture predicts that at least 31.5 million citizens may experience a food and nutrition crisis between the second and third quarter of this year. Now, this alarming data highlights the severity of the food crisis that has progressively escalated over the last few years. Now, the government is employing temporary measures. However, it is still too early to determine the effectiveness of these initiatives, and they aren't particularly, or they are in fact, short-term solutions that might not particularly solve this problem sustainably over the long term. But amidst this crisis, there have been calls here and there in different quarters by stakeholders for a quiet agricultural revolution of urban farming in our cities. It does appear to have to be rather, a beacon of hope as it offers a sustainable pathway to food security and economic empowerment. From rooftops to backyard gardens, Nigerians are being encouraged to turn to urban farming in order to grow their own food and take control of their food futures. The million-dollar question in this junction, however, is what does it take to succeed in this regard? We'll talk about this and more on the program this morning as we explore the potential of urban farming to transform Nigeria's food landscape and build a more sustainable future. On the program this morning, we're joined by the National President, Special Breeders Association of Nigeria, Mr. Almustapha Umar Hassan. Good morning, Mr. Hassan. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning, sir.
Right. We are going to start with getting your thoughts this way, first of all. Now, food production in and around cities is an integral part of the urban fabric in much of the developing world. As a matter of fact, in some regions, urban and peri-urban agriculture plays a very, very important role in diversifying urban diets and also providing staple foods for daily consumption. A report by the UNFAO, that's the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, accounts for over 1/10 of the global population, approximately 800 million people practicing urban agriculture worldwide. So it's not exactly a very new phenomenon, as it were. But at the fundamental level, what do we need to know as far as this particular venture is concerned? Because when, some people, especially urban dwellers, hear about farming, they think about the hinterlands or the rural areas, as you were, the places that are far-flung. And in some other worst cases, there is a misconception that it is, quote and unquote, dirty, if you like. So what do we need to know? What goes into, this particularly? Give us a sense of how, to go about it, this phenomenon, urban farming, generally.
Thank you very much. There is something I want to say before anything. The voice is breaking. Your voice is breaking. I did not hear what you said completely, but to my understanding,
Hassan, can you hear me clearly, Mr. Hassan?
Yes,
Can you hear me clearly now, Mr. Hassan? Are there still interferences?
I'm hearing. Yes. It's clear now.
Mr.
Come again, please. The voice is breaking.
Okay, we will ensure that that is sorted out pretty shortly. But at this point in time, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead. Thank you very much, sir.
I'm glad you can hear me now. So I was asking, to start with this line of thought, for you to give us a sense of what goes into urban farming, because there is a misconception about farming, especially amongst urban dwellers. So, at the fundamental level, what do we need to know with regards to urban farming? Let's start from there before we get into the deep end.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Urban farming is basically a method of innovative farming within urban areas using tube methods or container methods. That is in the area of producing vegetable and fruits, and cages in the area of producing poultry, and rubber containers in the area of producing fishery. Basically, urban farming is one farming that is an old tradition. It's not a new thing. If you can remember years back when we are young, our parents encourage us to either keep a fowl or a goat in our homes so as to be enterprising and know how to manage animals. So also our mothers and fathers are normally having a small farm in their backyards where you can go and pick tomato, pepper, and onions. These are basically what we call urban farming. Urban farming is not a new thing in our society. It has been an old tradition since olden days. It's just that we neglected it in our societies today. In Nigeria, we don't, everybody is a big man. People feel farming is only for the people that are living in the bush. But farming basically is something that can boost the urban economy, even increase community relationship. Sir, do you know that farming can bring robust education within the people living in the society, particularly in the urban areas? Those days, if you can remember in schools, we used to have school gardens. Today, no school, no primary or secondary school has garden. Those gardens are very, very important because they are teaching the younger ones on how to be self-sustainable, how to be self-reliant, how to do more exercise in the farm, how to produce for themselves, and how to be humble in the society. And you know,
Mr. Hassan, if you can hear me, can you hear me now? So you're
yes, I can
saying
say,
that, I mean, I heard everything you said clearly, and just as I outlined in the introduction, that urban farming is not a novel idea, it's not a novel phenomenon, it's something that's been with us. As a matter of fact, there's an account for it globally as to how many people, or world citizens, if you like, practice urban farming. However, you did make an assertion that there is no school at the moment that has a garden, whether front yard or backyard. I would like to refute that and say that you don't particularly have the statistics, and if we don't, it'll be a little too hasty to, make comments to that regard, if you like, conclusive or extrapolative comments to that regard. That said, let's move on. I reckon that there are some challenges, because just like I mentioned earlier and you corroborated, when people in the urban settings hear, or peri-urban settings as well, hear about urban farming or farming to start with, they scratch their head and wonder why they should engage in it because they think it's something that should be done in the hinterlands. So clearly there is a knowledge gap with regards to that idea to start with. So what needs to be done per se by way of policy changes and, if you like, initiatives on the part of the subnational governments, which are much closer to the people, and at the federal level to make sure that we scale up what we have at the moment when it comes to urban farming. That's the first one. You answer that, then we get into the next one because there are a few things I need to get your thoughts on. Let's start with that.
Okay, if I understand you very well, you are talking about the challenges in farming. Are you actually saying challenges in farming in our cities or what?
You've mentioned some of the challenges, just as I have also mentioned as well. I mean, the challenges are, innumerable. However, to surmount these challenges, what do we need to do by ourselves, as equal stakeholders, so to speak, and at the subnational level of government that is much closer to the people? What needs to be done by way of perhaps a change or a shift in policy and or initiatives that could help support urban farmers or help support urban farming, the practice of urban farming in general? What needs to be done? Because certainly we need to scale up and more people need to practice urban farming, especially in these precarious times that we're in, so that we can, facilitate food security.
Okay, thank you very much. There are a lot of, there are numerous policies by government in order to reduce all this problem we are facing. The only problem we are facing is that most of the policies are not being implemented. To be honest with you, there are very good policies. There are people in the position of authority, particularly in the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security. There are numerous people that I know that are ready. They are working tirelessly to bring, to come up with this olden tradition and assisted the society to do away with the problem. I know a program anchored by Director Animal Husbandry Services in the Ministry of Agriculture, Dr. Mrs. Lai Sholorin, on backyard farming. Backyard farming is something very, very interesting. It will boost the economy. It will increase the production. It will increase the value chain. It will help the poor masses. The income will increase. People can farm around their areas and they can produce a lot. People, the government and people in our societies today are looking at urban farming as nothing. But honestly, it's something that complements large-scale farming in the rural areas, because these are farming activities that usually used to be done all year round. No rainy season, no dry season. You can do it in dry season, you can do it in rainy season. You can minimize space by using it, by doing it. You can minimize water by using it. You can minimize the soil. You can do a soilless farming. Government policies are what we needed. Government needed to encourage people, and people need to be proactive. You can on your own, without even taking it to the market, you can plant tomato in your backyard.
Mr. Hassan, if you can hear me, I'm asking for the specific ones. I mean, it's convenient to say that we require this or that from the government at different levels, but which ones in particular? I mean, there is the Ministry of Agriculture, and of course now we have the Livestock Ministry, excuse me, coming up pretty shortly, as was declared by Mr. President not long ago. But at the domestic level, so to speak, right? The nuclear family who want to start up this sort of venture, who wants to get in on the action as far as urban farming is concerned. Surely there has to be something for them specifically by way of initiatives, if you like, that can, galvanize their efforts to contribute to food production in society, even though it might not necessarily, cater to the wider majority. The fact that it does, cater to their immediate environment is enough encouragement. So how do people like that get some sort of actuation, if you like, to be able to carry on with the venture? I need specifics, please.
Okay, it doesn't cost much to do urban farming. I don't know actually, apart from challenge of time, challenge of space, passion, will, and some other things that can stop one from actually participating in urban farming.
So I was asking before we went on that break that you kindly walk us through the global best practices of urban farming. And I mentioned a few appendages or a few factors that, are connected, talking about farming techniques, access to the markets, type of crops to pick that will be easy to cultivate, as he were, things like that. What are the global best practices?
You say, what are the problems?
Oh, best practices for urban farming or that support urban farming.
Okay, urban farming all over the globe is an old tradition, as I said, and as a universal practice. No country, no urban area that is not having the kind of farming activities that used to be obtained in other countries. Usually, people living around the urban areas get most of what they are eating at home from the urban areas, not from the rural areas. Urban farming divided into different categories. Normally, they are small scale. And in most of the countries, particularly the Asian countries, people produce and go to the market and sell. There is no limitation to what you will produce and to what you will take to the market. So it's a general practice worldwide. And I think, to my own understanding, there is no much differences in what is obtainable in other countries when it comes to urban farming. the farmers are smallholder farmers generally, and they produce either vegetable or fruits, and they take it to the market around them and sell to get income and boost the family income. Usually, these are the practice all over. Sometimes
Mr.
people
Hassan,
are
let's take a little detour from there. Let's, um, move on from that. So the federal government is currently throwing everything it has at the problems we have in the country vis-a-vis food scarcity and food insecurity, as you were. In fact, recently, amongst several other stopgap measures, emphasis on stopgap measures, there was a 150-day duty-free import window for food commodities. They suspended duties, tariffs, and taxes for importation of select food commodities. But in your view, as a stakeholder, do you think there has been enough incentives at the subnational level in order to grow food? Let's grow our own food.
to be honest, there is not. Government is not doing enough for farmers to grow foods for our consumption. Recently, federal government declares emergency in food security. But you will agree with me that there is still food crisis in the country. Why? Because of many factors. Issue of security around the areas where people are farming. People are not being able to go to farms because of insecurity. Poor government policies in terms of agriculture, agricultural policies, lack of machineries where people will use and produce in the area of large-scale farm production. Some people are making a lot of effort, government in states, local governments, and in some areas federal, but honestly, it's not enough. Therefore, there are numerous challenges confronting food production in Nigeria. That is why up till today we are facing shortage of food produce in the country. And there is serious negligence from the side of the government vis-a-vis from the side of the people when it comes to urban farming. Normally, urban farming complements large-scale arable farming. When people in the urban areas produce small, and take it to the market or sell it around the community or use it in their homes, it reduces the burden in the market. This brings sustainability in the area of food production. And it goes a long way in increasing the production. You get a lot of improved varieties of farm produce when you come to the urban centers. But honestly, government is not doing enough to increase this productivity. And from the side of the people, there is need to educate people to go ahead and start farming in the in their surroundings, in their compounds, produce gardens, produce food in tubes, produce food in sacks. You see a situation whereby people will produce cassava, people will produce Irish potato, people will produce sweet potato, people will produce orange, and people will produce tomato and pepper in their homes. And in this kind of situation, it will sustain the shortage. It will complement the effort of other farm producers.
Mr. Hassan, thank you for staying with us thus far. Yes, before we went on that break, I was going to ask you about, I was going to throw the question at you rather, with regards to the, budgeting for the sector, because a lot of conversations around that issue has come to the fore at different points. So there's the talk about the timeliness of the budget, and also with regards to the political will to ensure that there is at least a 10% annual allocation of the budget to the agriculture sector, and also the proper utilization of said budget has also been identified by most stakeholders as a strategic approach to help increase food production in the country. Do you share this sentiment?
Yes, of course. That is how it's supposed to be. I also have the opinion that there is need for the increase.
Mr. Hassan, please go on. We can hear you. Are you still with us, Mr. Hassan? Okay, I think we lost Mr. Hassan, but essentially we are still on the conversation about the potential of urban farming to transform Nigeria's food landscape and also to build a sustainable future. It's been quite the rough, patch or rough period for us in the, last couple of years, especially with regards to how much food we can produce on our own, of course, with the partnerships that, there are, both at the national and subnational level, and of course, international partnerships as well. Then, of course, as I was mentioning, as I was speaking about with with our guest, Mr. Hassan, the budgetary allocations. Of course, there have been several quarters where this has, been mentioned in the fall, where the allocation, it's been said that the budgetary allocation has fallen short than the required, as you were. So lately or recently, there have been more renewed calls for it to be at least 10% to help ramp up, what's been done so far. And there is also the idea that, there's a lack of political will to make these things happen. But then again, putting that into context, you see that, across the board, a lot of things aren't exactly the way that they should be, particularly because of a lack of political will. So if you factor in the 10% agriculture sector allocation, there is also the question of whether or not there will be the consequent proper utilization, because there is the issue of underutilization, there's the issue of transparency and all of that. All those factors put together essentially renders most of the efforts done by the government or carried out by the government a nullity, and it is indeed a problem. But of course, it doesn't take away the fact that more needs to be done, because essentially, as we are now, a lot has been thrown into, as I mentioned earlier, talking about the interventions by way of a reduction in waiver, or the suspension rather in waivers and all of that, and then incentives for smallholder farmers. There are a myriad of them, but then again, it's still remains to be seen what the efficacy of these policies are, what the efficacy of these stopgap measures are, as occasioned by what we see in the country. Of course, as I mentioned also earlier, there is the ongoing protest, and this is largely because of the hike in prices of goods and commodities, which Nigerians have over time seen their purchasing power dwindle. It's been really, really problematic, and the only way that they see fit to let their voices be heard is to go out on the streets with placards calling on the government to heed their call, to reverse some of the policies, and or, if you like, go one better and make sure that they can actually afford to live day to day and be able to, have their staples on their tables, because slowly but surely those staples disappeared. They were, first of all, expensive, and then they went from being expensive to totally disappearing from the tables of very many households in the country. So that is indeed a serious issue. And so, looking at other ways, as I mentioned much earlier, this is indeed a veritable way or veritable means to go about, producing our food, seeing as the wider mechanized farming and wider commercial farming, as it were, seems to be hampered by a lot going on in some of the food baskets or food portions of the nation, mostly up north and in the middle belt, where there are swathes of portions that are bludgeoned by insecurity. That, of course, is still being tackled by the government. But then again, the age-long idea or phenomena of urban farming again is taking center stage due to some stakeholders calling for more individuals, people like you, people like me, to go back into the farms, and not the farms in the hinterland as some would think, but farming in your front yard or your garden, as the case may be, or in your backyard. There are more and more advocates for backyard farming these days, and their voices are growing louder. So what they're calling for is perhaps more incentives by the government, whether at local level, whether at state level, whether at the federal level, and even on the houses of representatives, and essentially the both state assemblies and the national assemblies, to enact laws that could possibly, perhaps, favor, or if you like, support urban farming, because ideally you expect that the wider commercial farmers are the ones who have large portions of land to carry out these activities, and of course have the requisite equipment, technological wherewithal to carry out these farming activities rather seamlessly across the value chain. But in the domestic circle or in the domestic front, you find that it becomes problematic for the struggling, mother or struggling father or struggling, if you like, youth, who just wants to perhaps make an extra income to go about these activities, these urban farming activities, even though as I've also said, it's still slowly but surely gaining traction, more people coming into it. But those people actually need to know that they also are catered to in the grand scheme of things, so that they too, in their very own little way, can contribute to the GDP, and or, if not, can by themselves and for themselves grow what they can eat. Because if you cannot afford to get, what's out there in the markets, because either one, your purchasing power has shrunk over time, or two, there is some, issue, some problem that has just made it difficult for you to access, those commodities, perhaps because of a hike in transportation and whatnot. Put those things together, you see that that is essentially why urban farming is being encouraged at this point in time, so that people across the board can, find new ways to support themselves as far as food production is concerned, and what they eat on a day-to-day basis is concerned. So we've been looking at all of that, in context this morning, talking about urban farming as a sustainable pathway out of Nigeria's unfolding food crisis. That's how much we can take on the conversation and market insight this morning. Special thanks as well to Mr. Almustapha Umar Hassan the National President, Special Breeders Association of Nigeria, for joining us earlier. Unfortunately, the technical hitches, wouldn't let us conclude the conversation with him. But we do appreciate his input and his time joining us this morning. As we wrap up the program today, let's take a look at the currency market, both at the official and parallel market. The dollar today, the 6th of August, 2024, currently is selling the official market to the Naira at 1,512. To the pound sterling, still on the official market, 1,981. To the euro, 1,703 is what the trade looks like at the official market. And at the parallel market, the dollar is trading to the Naira at 1,593. To the pound sterling, 2,029 Naira. That's still on the parallel market. And the euro is trading to the Naira at 1,741 Naira at the parallel market. So that is the currency market update. Many thanks for joining us on the program this morning. Of course, do join us tomorrow for another insightful, engaging episode of Market Insight. Until then, do stay tuned. I am David Chiedu. Enjoy the rest of your day.